Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome to Unmasked. I'm Vanessa. We're bringing you a live nice and early this morning. Well, for me anyway, because I was sick yesterday. So thank you for your patience. And I'm very honored, as always, to have Mike King from Profiling Evil here today. So let's go ahead and bring him on.
Hey, Vanessa, Mike. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you. I'm so sorry you've been ill.
It's all right. Just one of those weeks, probably from never sleeping or something. That's all I can figure out.
Well, and everybody is so shook up every time they even get a sniffle. They think it's COVID. They're afraid to sneeze on an airplane. I mean, it's a crazy deal. I had to cough the other day on a flight back from Texas, and I was doing everything I could to keep from doing that.
I know you do. You feel like it's a crime to cough or to sneeze anymore. Exactly. I know I thought that yesterday. I thought, oh my gosh, I've had a headache for 2 days. It must be COVID. But anyway.
It's cool. It's great to see all these names piling in, and I'm so grateful that you'd invite me to jump on with you. It's fun. I know we text back and forth a lot, and it's really meaningful for me. I just appreciate your insight on these cases.
Oh, same. I love talking to you about these. Like I was saying, I could keep you on here all day, but we'll just have to have you on again for another case. So today's a big day. We find out if Barry is going to go to trial.
Sorry about that. I'm going to turn
It's okay. We find out if Barry is going to go to trial for the murder of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, and we find out if we're finally going to be able to get the arrest affidavit. So I had to ask your opinion on that. Do you think we will finally get the arrest affidavit?
You know, all the experts I talked to suggest that it's going to happen regardless, that we're going to see the arrest affidavit. That doesn't come from anyone in an official capacity, just other experts. Even a few days ago, I was on with Craig Silverman from Denver, who's a former chief prosecutor in the Denver area for the DA's office. I was doing a little podcast on his channel, and he was just confident that we'd see it regardless. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if he isn't bound over, then the judge must not think there's enough evidence. So why would he release it? But this is a public document and it should come out.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think, I know we've heard reasons, but why do you think that it hasn't? I mean, do you really think it's, I mean, because the daughters were there during the preliminary hearing, as we talked about. I was sitting in front of them there, and so they heard everything, that was going on during that. But why do you think?
Well, I mean, you sat through the hearing. I guess I would have the question for you, but it seems to me like the judge needs to err on the side of caution on this thing, just knowing what aggressive litigators the defense team is. They're going to look for anything they can possibly find to appeal if in fact he's bound over. I believe he will be, and if he's convicted, and I still believe he will be convicted.
I do too. I know there's been a lot of talk online. Even a lot of people yesterday were saying they don't think he will. I absolutely think he will go to trial. I mean, maybe that's, I do. I don't see, I don't know. After sitting there, and I'm hoping, I don't know what you think, because I saw your interview with Linda Stanley, by the way, which I thought was great. I watched it twice. I thought it was really interesting. She definitely seems confident, and she's been able to get the ball rolling on this. So I'm assuming, do you think they're going to have a lot of, some big bombshells during trial that you didn't hear?
You mean during the trial itself, or during today's prelim hearing where they're given a chance for final arguments?
Well, I guess both, but definitely during trial. I'm thinking they held a lot back during the preliminary.
It's interesting. I don't know Linda Stanley was so good about keeping the cards close to the vest. And I loved all the comments from people leading up to my interview with her of accusing us of throwing the case out and chasing YouTube more than justice and all of that. And I was so glad to see many of those opinions change, and to get comments back from other experts in the field, like Scott Rice saying what a great interview it was. I have no idea what Linda's strategy today might be, but having worked for district attorneys and attorney generals most of my career, I can tell you that they're only going to show just enough information in the prelim to get the judge to bind them over for trial. And then they're going to get in front of a jury where they can sway emotion and everything else. But you want to just put the pros on during a preliminary hearing that aren't going to be shook up by a defense attorney badgering him and other kinds of things, versus the layperson who may be brought in to testify about something they saw or heard.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, and again, I learned a few things during that interview. I thought she did an excellent job. And you can't ever make anyone happy. Everyone has a problem with something that you do. But I thought it was interesting when she talked about, say, he's prosecuted by the state. And then a lot of people were asking what happens if then they find her. She explained that with the double jeopardy, that the feds can go after him as well, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, so that's a really great point to bring out, is if the state doesn't get him bound over today, then they can still go back. They can go and take another dip at the well, and they can try again with more evidence later. So all's not lost if he doesn't get bound over. But if he goes to trial and is found not guilty, then you have this double jeopardy problem where you can't go back and say, we're going to try it again because we didn't like the outcome. And what she talked about was the fact that the federal government then can step in from the U.S. Attorney's Office and file charges at the federal level, and then go after him. And we're seeing that happen, like on the Derek Chauvin case. Even though they got a conviction, the feds still want their pound of flesh, and so they're going after him as well.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Well, you just brought this up. I wanted to touch on this too. When we were there in the morning waiting, because we were there for a long time trying to get in, and they said they were, before we went down there, they said they were going to let like 17 to 20 people in, which did not turn out to be the case. It was more like 8 to 9 each day. That was frustrating.
Yeah. How many people were there that had to go to the fairgrounds, for instance?
Quite a few. They had, the first day that I was there, I had to go to the fairgrounds after waiting. I mean, because there were people that got there at 3 a.m. for that. And people
we actually had a couple of folks that listened to, I think, your channel and Profiling Evil, that called in and said, hey, we've been here since 3 a.m. We're going to keep tweeting and texting you all day long. And that was awesome to have them in. And then when I found out you were there, that was just so exciting.
Yeah, it was interesting because and it was fine watching from the fairgrounds. They had it set up, and you got to see from the judge's perspective. So you could see Barry, straight on. They had a huge screen. And then day 2, I talked about this on the show, so I know everyone that watches knows this already, but another YouTuber that flew in from Texas gave up her seat for me to be in the courtroom on day 4, which was incredibly generous. Ended up sitting with his daughters or in front of his daughters. And the whole thing was, like we talked about, was surreal. Just seeing Barry, in person like that, and his mannerisms, like we talked about. And I think Linda touched on that too.
I had some questions for you on that, Vanessa, because I experienced this a lot when I investigated cases. I created these images in my mind of who I was expecting to see, and rarely did I see that person when I finally got face to face with them to interview them. What was your experience like as you've thought about your own personal biases and thoughts and emotions about Barry in the moment you saw him?
Well, this has happened both times that I've been to a high profile case. It happened with Chris Watts, and it happened with this. I expected them to be much bigger, I guess, in my head. I mean, I don't know if that's because of the crimes or if that's because of just seeing them. And both times they were a lot smaller. Barry has lost a lot of weight since we've seen him. And that was surprising. I thought he looked much smaller than I thought he would. And he also looked, these are just my opinions here, but very tired.
Yeah.
Very tired, kind of worn. You could see it around his eyes. He just looked, but he also was trying to look very confident. I noticed he was very kind of, even. It's hard, and I brought this up too, and I want to know your opinion. The masks were driving me crazy. You can't see his facial expressions at all. And I'm big on expressions and watching body language. And I really do think, I've said this before, that this is an advantage for the defense, because something would happen interesting and you'd look over to him and nothing. The stupid mask is over his face. You can only see his eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to impact the jury or
It
not.
will be interesting because at this stage, I don't know that it's going to have a lot of impact because you're dealing with pros that are only there to resolve legal issues. Now, in
Yes.
front of a jury, that's an entirely different thing. And actually, you make a really good point. You'd almost want to race to a jury trial as quickly as you could, unless your client's going to be showing emotions such as incredible distraught when they're, accusing him of things, and it's like, oh no, I didn't do that. But yeah, if you're worried about him showing no emotion, that might be actually a nice strategy for a defense.
That's what I thought too. If I was the
Yeah.
prosecution, yeah, I'd want a clear mask if I was the prosecution. That's just me though, because you could see his body tense up at certain things. He certainly doesn't seem to like anything hearing negative, about himself. His body language stiffens up is one thing I noticed.
Yeah. I know that the DA spoke about him kind of staring at her, and she finally just stared him down.
Mhm.
But I had a couple of people that were in the courtroom that told me that they were uncomfortable, that he actually was looking around almost individual by individual. Did you have any experience like that?
I did. But I would say multiple times during the day, if I could, had to put a number on it, at least 3 times on the breaks, he would turn around and he would look at his daughters first. That was his priority. And then they would keep eye contact and, smile and mouth things, to each other, stuff like that. And then he would go around the courtroom and look at every single person. And yeah, he held eye contact with me a couple times. And I mentioned this, but it was just, he doesn't break it. So I was joking with Teresa. I didn't want him to win, but I eventually looked away each time because it's odd to just, have this stare down with somebody, especially Barry. So it was strange, but he definitely does that. He's
You should have
intimidating,
asked questions to him since he was staring at you, and he would have looked away.
right?
You should have pulled your pencil out and held it and
Yeah,
said,
I, I should have. Did you do it? Where is it? Yeah, I know. It was strange, and he did it, and I watched him after that, and he would do it with everyone. He wanted to know who was in the courtroom, and he wanted them to know that he knew they were in the courtroom. That's my interpretation of it. It was very interesting. I could see how he'd be unnerving to people that live in town with him, or have any kind of bad interaction with him. But
yeah, interesting. We talk about this a lot when we talk about domestic violence relationships and how these people uh, they become so good and so manipulative at being bad and giving the snake eye and these kinds of things. And I'm really grateful. I happen to marry a person who, if I pull the snake eye, I get called on it right away. And so there's responsibility in a relationship. But these domestic violence situations, if in fact this is all true that we've learned, it's very intimidating for people, and sometimes it's just easier to put up with it at first. But what we think is easy never is, because it always gets worse. It doesn't get better.
mhm, yeah. And I think it came out during that. I thought it was really upsetting to hear. I came out of there with the impression that Suzanne was very unhappy, felt very trapped in her life, and just it was just sad. She finally, it seems like she saw a light at the end of the tunnel and new beginnings. And this is of course allegedly, wasn't going to let that happen. But my take on it.
Yeah. So in those first couple of days, Vanessa, when you were sitting in the hearing, and the news and revelation of Suzanne's affair came out. I mean, when you heard that officially in the courtroom, what was your thought?
I was distracted by his daughter's responses. I have to admit that when they talked about the text between Suzanne and Sheila, and that Macy had talked about, them not getting along and allegedly telling Barry to leave her alone, you could hear the girls start to whimper and cry and sniffle, and they were very upset. And that distracted me kind of from what was being said in the courtroom. But I did feel really bad for them because at that moment I thought, this must be horrible to sit here. Their mom's gone and now they're listening to all of these details and having to hear their own private conversations with their mother read in public. I mean, these girls are young. I thought that must be humiliating and hard. That was the moment I really felt, bad for them.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
Especially the
So
older one.
um, as that information came out and we kind of got through it, one of the things that I was worried about, and it's skillfully done in these trials, is that just that stuff becomes so much noise, but it still doesn't give people the right to murder someone or to be
No.
domineering, and yet the defense did a great job of starting people down that pathway. And again, to me, it's noise that I don't believe the court is impacted by. A jury, though, when this comes out in a jury trial, it's going to be a hump that the jury will have to get over. The judge doesn't change the fact of the elements of homicide.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think maybe if they take it into account with what she was dealing with him, and because you can just hear how miserable she was. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe it's because I'm a woman or whatnot. I felt a lot. I felt sorry for her, and regardless of that. And I did
Yeah.
wonder though. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
I did wonder, do you think the girls being there and crying and supporting their dad and, during the jury's going to see all that. Do you think that will impact the jury favorably towards Barry?
It will endear the jury to the daughters because no one wants to see children suffer for any reason. And this is where, in my opinion, and again, I mean, I'm just a tired old cop, having worked for a lot of attorneys for a lot of years and been in a lot of trials. I just know that, in my opinion, it is incumbent upon the DA, the district attorney, to step up and call out during a closing argument or during some stage of the game, to call out, even potentially bring on a psychologist, in my opinion, onto the witness stand for just a few moments to say, hey, what emotion would a child be going through in a situation like this? Because they've lost their mother. They're now standing to lose their father. They love them both, regardless of what happened. They may believe, they may not believe, they may be incapable of even judging because they're so close to it. But that's what the jury needs to be reminded of, in my opinion, is that whatever emotion you're seeing there, just be empathetic, but it's of no value in this case. It's got to be disregarded in this case. It's like the one troll and the one person that says you're the greatest person on earth, Vanessa. You got to kind of just say that was really interesting information, and then you move it off and you go with what the groundswell's teaching you.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I think that would be smart of them to call that out at the beginning and talk about, the girl's mindset. Because I thought about that. I mean, you can't help but notice it. I mean, I'm sure you heard the judge had to stop proceedings at one point because they were crying so hard. And he said, I know this is very emotional. Make sure you keep your masks on and things like that. I mean, it was upsetting. So, and kind of on those terms, one of the other most impactful moments was when the team of women, I'm sure you saw all the pictures, walked in, in a line to defend him. I'm sure, do you think that's a deliberate tactic with the full female team of defense attorneys?
So I don't know what that group was doing, or if they all just individually had that idea and thought, holy cow, look, we are all of like mind. Most of the people that are there are going to be of like mind, either on one side of the fence or the other. And it really, in a preliminary hearing, doesn't swing the people that are there. Now, again, the question to me always becomes, how do you manage that and maintain decorum, and then let the prosecution and defense try to sway the jury one way or another? And but the defense, the prosecution, and certainly the judge are not impressed one way or another by that. It's just, it's just noise, but it sure makes us feel better when we feel like we're standing behind our team. It's kind of interesting though, isn't it? Behavior. You almost feel like you're at a football game and you're looking to see what color jersey someone's wearing up in the stands. So
It's very interesting, and it reminded me, I used to intern for a judge when I was very young in college, and the first, murder trial I ever sat in on was the guy who kidnapped and murdered a 10-year-old girl. That was the first time I sat in a room and really looked at evil. And it was the same tactics. I would think that a lot of people could see right through that. He had all female attorneys, and he would say something and they would lean on him and they would rub his back and laugh at what he would say. And even, I think I was 19 at the time, and I was disgusted. It was very
yeah.
transparent to me. So I would hope a jury would see right through that.
Well, and those are things, again, that I think sometimes the prosecution and defense are so enmeshed in the battle that they're forgetting some of the behaviors. And I would love to see in an opening statement by the defense attorney that very issue called out. Members of the jury, please recognize that in this audience there could be people who are for or against the defendant. That you may hear or see behavior from family members, but the only thing you should focus on is the evidence that's going to be presented. Don't allow the emotion of what you see going on around you to impact your decision, because we want it to be a really solid trial. We want it to be
Mhm.
not filled with emotion or something where someone could make a mistake and give the defense, if he's convicted, a reason to appeal, which they undoubtedly will regardless.
Mhm. Well, from an investigator standpoint, what do you think the biggest challenges are, when or if and when it goes to trial?
Yeah, a couple of things that, well, I think for the prelim, a couple of the challenges are that, and I've had some people really disagree with me on this, but I believe I have science, having worked in this field for a lot of years. The cell phone data is not accurate data. We've been talking for over a year about how poor cellular reception is there. So the defense was right when they suggested that Barry would have to be going 40 miles an hour or going through walls in order to be chasing her, based on what the cell phone data was showing. And I think if you didn't catch it, there was a video I did where I actually just sat with my phone in one location and let it drift and let it move around. That triangulation process, or a process of looking at 3 different cell towers to figure out where your phone is what creates that little circle with your dot in the middle of it on the map on your phone. And you see sometimes that's a big circle and sometimes it's a little one. And that just boils down to how accurate that triangulation is that's going on. If they could get the device location, the actual XY coordinate or the dot on the map, it's going to be much more accurate, but even that's going to probably be about 15 feet of fudging room moving around. So I think the cell data is going to be less important than they made it, other than the trend that it provides, which is that they were in the house, that Suzanne was at the house texting at 2:09 p.m., and that 30 minutes later, GPS off of the vehicle shows Barry pulling into the house, and then all of a sudden Suzanne's phone stopping and this whole chain of events starting to go wonky, including him turning off his mobile phone for 6 hours. And if you go in and look at those videos that I did, we actually show how far he could travel in 3 hours and still make it back. And it is literally hundreds and hundreds of square miles that he could have taken and disposed of evidence of any kind in that area. So that's gonna be a problem. I was frustrated that I never once heard anyone say we went out and shot the dart gun. So we don't know if that thing works or it doesn't. But the thing that needed to come out, in my opinion, is doesn't matter. That can be manually manipulated. And the way that works is that when the actual dart is pushed into the body, it pushes a little tiny plug out of the backside of the dart that releases the chemical into the body. So it doesn't matter whether it's shot at a high speed or somebody walks up and just thumps it on somebody. If that's truly an angle that they're thinking that she was tranquilized, then you need to at least say, here's the options for that. But man, I thought you should have at least gone out and fired the gun. Not say, yeah, it looks unoperable, but we think it's a dart gun.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the biggest reasons is because he said he shot that gun in April, and then we heard testimony from law enforcement that it didn't work. So I know sitting, in the stands, I was kind of confused on that point. Well, did it work or didn't it? He's saying it did. They're saying it doesn't. So I do agree. But then I also thought about the syringe cap. I don't know what your thoughts are on this. In the dryer, and those khaki shorts were in the dryer. And I know he has multiple pairs of khaki shorts, so they can't really pinpoint if that's the pair. But we also thought they talked a lot about, or kind of implied, he could have put it in a syringe, had it in his pocket, stuck her with the syringe full of that, and then dropped the, cap back in his pocket, forgot it was there because of everything that happened. And then maybe, threw his shorts in the dryer, washer and dryer. So I guess that's possible too, right? If he didn't use the gun, if he just used a syringe.
Well, or even if he did use the gun, because on the weapon, you have to still pull the cap off. The cap's only for transportation, for loading the gun. So when you put that dart in there, you're going to pull the cap off and then stick it in the chamber of the rifle, close the bolt down, and shoot it like you would any other bullet. But you have to take that cap off so that the syringe is exposed. The needle is exposed. And so it makes perfect sense. And what would be interesting and we will never know this, but I would want to know which pocket was the cap in, because if it's in his left pocket, which would make sense if he's right-handed, he's going to hold the syringe with his right hand, and he's going to pull the cap off and stick it in his pocket and put it in the gun. But all that's a bunch of hubbubaloo and doesn't really matter. What we do know is that it ended up in the dryer, and there could be lots of reasons for that. The defense, I think, poorly challenged that the police planted it. Why on earth would they plant it? But yeah, that's an interesting piece of information. The 22 shell, people have gotten so strung out about the 22 round that was found in the bedroom. I'll tell you, that doesn't bother me at all, Vanessa. I mean, I live in countryside where we have to sometimes take people take a rifle out and shoot the ground squirrels because they dig up your fields and everything else. Those are about this big. So having a pocket full of those and pulling your pocket out to clean would be really easy to have one not pull out. And there's a million reasons why that thing could have ended up on the floor, being shaken out, being pulled out. Again, it doesn't make any sense because there's no evidence of blood in the home. So it's not like he was loading or trying to load a weapon to kill somebody. So that's kind of weird, but
I agree. Yeah, people got really stuck on, but I think that's what they're counting on. And I noticed that during the preliminary, they would take little facts and make them so confusing and, go down these rabbit holes that you kind of lose sight of the big picture. And I guess that's their tactic. But they did that on a lot of things, even on the text where she texted him, "I'm done." It was, to me, some of the stuff was almost comical. I'm not saying that they're not good attorneys. I'm sure they are, and they've got a good record, but they tried to imply that maybe she meant she was done with her coffee because she was having coffee with her neighbor. I mean, come on. You look at it in the whole context, and they were having a fight, but it was like every little thing like that, they threw in a different explanation.
Well, and something like that's a great argument when you have a jury, because all you got to do is convince a couple of them to say, I just am uncomfortable with this, so give them enough reasons to be uncomfortable, and then you're home free. But that was an interesting comment and an interesting answer. We found DNA in the vehicle glove box, or on the glove box. Again, I'm wondering, that to me would have been an easy answer. We know that they were looking for tires, to change the tires. Did they go to a local tire shop? Did anyone go to the 2 or 3 tire shops that are in Salida, because there can't be that many, and ascertain which one did that vehicle go through to get its tires rotated, or the snow tires put on or taken off at that time of year, and then do DNA on people. Find out if you got a sex offender living in there. I mean, it's
right.
I don't know.
I had the same thought as well, with that it was most likely when she took her car into the shop. How did you feel? The investigator did bring something up, and I can't remember which one it was off of the top of my head, but he talked about the door damage, and that in his experience, and they did object to this, they didn't like this, but in his experience, it looked like a home invasion break-in where someone kicks in the door. So in your experience, I mean, did you see where it was coming from? You thought that was a big...
That was much bigger, in my opinion, than many of the other pieces of evidence that came out. And that my hope would have been that the prosecution would have been more demanding that this police officer is an expert at looking at homes that have been burglarized and other things, to be able to see where there's forced entry, where there's something that's been jimmied or changed. I mean, that's what a police officer looks at. And there is a specific way when a door is pushed open. We've probably all seen it at our houses. If we've had children, we've all had doors that the kids have slammed and created damage on. There are specific kinds of things that would come out in that. And I thought that was huge. Again, it would be interesting. Does that door lock? And many couples have a lock on their door just so they have privacy. So that force was an internal force pushing into the room from the hallway. And so all of that becomes really significant. Does it mean he did it? It certainly doesn't, but it's certainly a powerful piece of information that I thought was really good to bring out.
I do too. That was one of the moments, I think, of all of them. That was one of the big moments, I thought, because it painted a picture for me. And I mean, it could be the wrong picture, but to me, I almost pictured, okay, well, he admitted he threw away tranquilizer materials, as he said. So then you start to see this picture, did he tranquilize her? And they said that she would have 8 minutes before she passed out, was their best guess. So, did she run to the bedroom and try to lock herself in, and he kicked in the door? And, I don't know. I have a bunch of different scenarios in my head. I don't know what you think happened that day, or if you have a particular scenario.
It's interesting. I'm not troubled by any of the evidence. Like I argued with Nancy Grace on her show about the cell phone drift, because she says it's proof that he was chasing her. And of course, my opinion on that. But that all said, I would argue that entirely different than the way I heard it. I would just, I'm baffled why they're doing closing arguments of sorts today when the judges had 2 weeks to make up his mind what he wants to do. This whole thing is kind of theatrical, but what I would do is I would paint a picture, if that was really the belief I had, that Suzanne is texting her boyfriend, sending lewd pictures, in his opinion, Barry's, and that he's enraged. He grabs his tranquilizer, either shoots or just walks up behind her and plunges it into her shoulder or wherever. And that here is cell phone evidence that would support multiple locations through the house, taking into account that the accuracy of a cell phone in this region is terrible, but we do see the phone moving around, and it supports a theory that they possibly could have been chasing through the home to different locations. But I'd call it out from the beginning. But keep in mind, folks, there's drift, but it doesn't change the trend that says the phone was here in the house. It may have moved from room to room on its own, but it was right here. It wasn't 10 miles away. It was in the house right after that happened, and in conjunction with his vehicle pulling into the driveway. So all that becomes a lot more compelling. And then vision that if in fact this was something where he plunged her with a tranquilizer, that as they run through the house, she barricades herself in the room and he has to force it open, which is so interesting because there's evidence on the door jamb to support that at some point somebody forced their way into this bedroom. We don't know if it happened that day, but we'll let you decide, judge or jury, because all of a sudden everyone that's smart starts envisioning in their mind, holy cow, I can see this couple running through the house. I can see her with her foot against the door, locking it, and him kicking the door open. We can start to envision this, and that's what we've got to have evidence do, is support the vision that we're painting. And then we have all this other thing, testimony about I'm unhappy, I want to get out of it, all of the things, I'm fearful. All of that comes together, and that's what makes these cases so cool. In my opinion, these circumstantial cases, is that circumstantial cases are a combination of all the forms of evidence. We don't have a body. Okay. We don't have a body. That's a hurdle that the prosecution has to get over. But all this stuff, and all of a sudden this person disappearing off the face of the planet doesn't just make sense to without painting it with evidence, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. And when you were in law enforcement, did you work a lot of no body homicides?
Worked a number of them. I mean, I guess it's hard to say what a lot is. The thing that I found a lot of interest in is I've done some research. There have been more than, in the last 100 years, which is a long time, there have been more than 500 death convictions, murder convictions, where there was no body. So this is not out of the realm. And I mean, even in Colorado, all we got to do is look at Dante Lucas and Kelsey Schelling. I mean, just a few weeks earlier, he's convicted without a body. So this is not as big of a hurdle as people want it to be. And of course, the defense certainly wants it to be a big hurdle. They want it to sound like you can no way do this without a body. And this baloney, in my opinion, and these are all my opinions, folks, this baloney that Suzanne left her wallet, left her car, left everything she knew, and just went off to Ecuador in awaiting her lover is baloney. It's absolute hogwash. And there's no way she would have not communicated with her family, her loved ones. She's too caring of an individual. Regardless of choices she made, she had too many connections that she would have walked away from.
Totally agree. And I know that's one of the many things they're trying to push. But yeah, her purse, everything, I know they couldn't find, they made a big deal about this one medication that she allegedly filled and they couldn't find, but her medications, her purse, her ID, her insurance card, when she's still, just getting cleared from her cancer treatment. Yeah, none of it makes sense. And that's, of course, when he went with the 70 or 80 grand in the safe that we don't even know existed. I highly doubt he had it in there in the first place. But, absolutely. And from a mother to look at another mother like that, she didn't take off on her daughters like that. And her boyfriend is still where he was. So where did she run off to?
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. So how troubled are you that the boyfriend didn't have the backbone to step up and tell police immediately?
I tried to see his point of view. I always try to do that. I always try to see I can understand he was scared and had a lot on the line. But at the same time, just my opinion, I think it is a big deal. I mean, I get it. You know, he's married with 6 kids. He's worried about his job. I understand that. But at the end of the day, he made a choice for himself over her, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because that was what, 6 months, I think? 6 months. And
Yeah.
I would say that absolutely hindered the investigation. Would you think so?
Oh, uh, I just think it's interesting to watch when we lie and we're not transparent in our lives, the work we have to go through to try to keep the lie alive. I don't know.
Well, can he get in any, I guess he can't get in any trouble for that, for holding back for 6 months like that? I
No,
mean,
no, not unless I mean, and, you know, we're watching it with Gabby Petito right now too. All you got to do is say, "I want a lawyer,"
right.
and you're off limits. And people can hate your guts for it, but that's what the Constitution provides. And he was never pointed out. The troubling part is decency says, "Holy cow, why didn't you figure out how to do something?" I
It
don't
made
know.
me sad for Suzanne because I felt like I got a little weird when you asked the question because only you never know who's going to watch these. So I'm trying to choose my words carefully. However, it made me sad for Suzanne because here she had been in this bad relationship and thought, she saw this wonderful man and escape or whatever it was going to be. And then he kind of failed her too and showed poor character too. So
Yeah,
that's how I looked at it.
yeah,
Will
interesting.
he have to come to the trial and testify?
Oh, I would bet he ends up testifying. Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah,
should
and
be
you know what
interesting.
I'm so mad about is Suzanne was victimized by his selfishness. His wife and his children were victimized by his selfishness. And he can feel as bad as he wants about being exposed. And I've never said his name, and I won't. But I just think all of the collateral damage when we choose to be deceptive.
Well,
Wow.
I'm thinking if I'm coming down, Sled is about 3 hours away from me, but if I'm going to the trial at all, that would be a day I would wanna see, or a couple of days. And I'm just saying, I can't imagine having Barry and her or ex-boyfriend in the same courtroom. I can't imagine the level of tension that will be in there or even his reactions, his responses. I don't know,
Yeah.
for an egomaniac like Barry to be in there with that. I don't know.
So before you get to a trial and whether you're going to see him testify, do you think he's going to be bound over today?
I do. And that was that you keep reminding me of all the best points. Uh, he showed no emotion, and I'm sure you knew until the very end. And I thought that was so telling of Barry. He lost it. Did he really think he was going home? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what he thought because that's when he, was defeated and emotional and crying because he really thought he was walking out of there on
Not
day
when they
4.
theorized about all the ways she could have died, but when he finds out I can't
Right.
get out of jail today.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. So, um, and by the way, I agree with you. I believe he's going to be bound over. And
Yeah.
one of the things I pushed for pretty hard, and I could never get an answer till the prelim, was who signed the arrest affidavit. And finally, Judge Murphy confessed that he signed the arrest affidavit. And I thought, how interesting that is. I wonder if it'll ever become an issue. But if he thought there was enough evidence initially to do the arrest, is it really likely he would throw the case out later? That seems odd to me because that would
Yes.
be almost like him saying, "Hey, I was wrong when I did this." So
Right.
I felt number one, I felt like the prosecution did a great job. They didn't throw out all the ugly silver bullets that everyone wanted to hear, but
Mhm.
again, you want to just put out enough to get the judge to bind them over. But I thought the defense did a great job. And again, the defense's job is to show where there are problems and to create noise. And I thought they did a great job. I mean, they're impressive women. So the bigger question is he going to be bonded out?
Yeah, I don't think so. Do you?
I got a sense he's going to get out of jail. Yeah. And
Really?
I'm really troubled. In fact, I
Wow.
did a video where when I was talking to Scott Reich on my show, I said, this is where in my opinion, the DA really needs to step up to remind the court. Barry Manilow, he probably shouldn't be called into this. Barry Morphew does not have a home in the area. He no longer has that anchor. His daughters have moved from the area. He doesn't have that anchor. He's probably despised by most of the community, so he doesn't have really an emotional tie. So if there ever was a flight risk, he could be a flight risk. And that's something that I would want the court really to consider in this. But this idea of proof presumption great, I don't know that they made it over the top to convince the judge that he shouldn't be given a bail, maybe an incredibly high bail, and it might be a bail so high he can't reach it, but that he has the ability to get out and help in his own defense as they prepare for his trial. And so that's, to me, the thing I'm most intrigued with today. But heck, I've been wrong in so many trials, Vanessa. It doesn't even shake me up anymore. Yeah.
Still, I think that would be, I would be personally be shocked, but I mean, I think he would be an absolute flight risk. I think he'd be out of here, which is a scary thought. Barry's all about self-preservation.
Pushing the stuff I did when he was looking at hunting trips in the African continent, in South America, and I would really push the fact that there's nothing to keep him here. But anyway, it'll be interesting. And I guess the other question I have that I'm probably thinking too far down the trail, but will this be pushed over to a bigger venue, like pushed up to Denver or something? And of course that won't be decided today, but that's a possibility too.
If he did get bail, someone just asked in comments, would he be put on house arrest and monitored that way? Or no?
Could be. They could put an ankle bracelet on him and say, here's the restrictions. They could say, you're on your own, give him $1 million bail. And if he reaches the bail, tell him you're free to go until we hold the trial. So that's why I think, I hope that in the closing arguments today, or the closing comments, maybe is a better term, that the prosecution also weighs in on whether they consider him to be a flight risk or not. I guess I'm leaning more that he's going to be released than not in some condition. And I don't know why, other than, and I don't understand Colorado's proof presumption great very well. So I'm just shooting from the hip here, but that's just kind of my thought.
Wow. Well, that's going to be interesting. Actually, one thing we all talked about during the hearing was on day 3, things changed from 3 to 4. On 3, they didn't have any bailiffs on him. When in the breaks, he would stand up freely and be able to walk around. I mean, not walk around too far, but he didn't really know. It didn't seem like anyone was really paying much attention to him. He was just kind of free to. But then I wonder if that got back to them, of people asking about it, because on day 4, when he would stand up during breaks, there were bailiffs right on him within about, I'd say, a foot or 2 on each side.
Oh, wow.
It was an interesting.
Were his legs shackled?
No.
Interesting.
Not that I saw. No, he was just standing there. We were in his suit, so that was interesting. I don't know if that's normal. I was trying to see if there's any questions in here, like Ted Bundy.
You what?
I was just looking at comments really quick. Yeah, we were kind of, obviously he can't, but we were Like, what if he pulls a Ted Bundy but he's just standing there in a nice suit. I mean, we're in Salida. It's not like he's going to take off and go anywhere. But it was interesting. It was kind of like in Breaks. He's just one of the normal people. But day 4, they totally changed that, and he did have bailiffs right there. So
Oh,
that was just
wow.
one of the observations we had.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. And I suspect that they probably had every entrance covered very closely, and they probably magged everyone when they came in. So there were no risks of, him being able to do something wonky. But they may have been just trying to be civil and give him a little distance.
Can we squash this rumor? I see it all the time, and I don't know if there's any basis to it before I say squash this rumor. But this has been going around for a while. I keep seeing this. Is there anything to support this, or is this a random rumor?
Jenna, see, that's a great question, because I don't know the answer to this other than to say I do not believe with any piece of my body that the judge wouldn't recluse himself, tell everyone we have a relationship. I can't be a part of this. Number one, I don't think he wants the case. I think there is so much stress on him that if he had a reason out, he would have said, hey, we need to get somebody else and move this to another venue. So personally, I don't believe it. I think it was started, and just because it is such an attractive line, gathered a lot of attention.
I just saw that a lot after preliminary, and I meant to ask you actually a while back.
Yeah, and I mean, think about Aiton and Nilsson and Linda Stanley. None of them would have allowed that to happen. They all are none of them are shrinking violets. They would have gone right at the judge's bench and said out of line. So I don't believe it for a minute.
Well, and the other thing I noticed about you bring up the judge and not wanting to be on this, with all the times I've been to or been in court watching these types of things, he seemed very, very fair, very patient, very, very patient. He seemed to be getting exasperated. At one point, I think it was day 4, he said, I just want to be done with this. It was just constant objections through the whole time. A lot of us were counting them. I think after lunch, there were about 7 objections within a half an hour. And it was distracting.
And is that because he's already felt like he's filled the bucket to the level he needs it filled to say we have enough to bind him over, and so everything else was just like noise again, or not? That's interesting. But yeah, I wondered that same thing, and I thought even when he said I need a couple weeks to make the right decision, not a quick decision, I thought this is really evident from the very beginning that he is going to err on the side of the defense and minimize the opportunities for appeal. And while it might be frustrating to us who want this wrapped up in a 30-minute crime series show, this thing needs to go the route it's going to protect the system.
I agree. I mean, I think we were all frustrated by the end. It was a long 2 days. Very long. It really was. The arguing was, it actually elicited a few chuckles from nothing's funny about it, but just the bickering. There were a lot of reporters and people looking around like, geez, man, you couldn't get out a sentence, especially when they start talking about the girls. It'd be like, well, and did Macy say objection? Did Mallory say objection? What about the tech objection? So you just put your pen down after a while. I mean, it was just, that was how day 4 was.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, to say the least. Lucy Pearltops, between Utah and Colorado, what weird stuff goes on in these 2 states? I hear that on a daily basis. Like, I really do.
Yeah, we're going to get back together and talk about Gabby at some point, aren't we?
Yes, we definitely need
about
to.
Wacky.
Yeah. Speaking of Utah, and I know. I don't know.
Please, folks, don't send me a dirty note because I laughed and said Gabby at the same time. It's just it wasn't meant to laugh at Gabby. It was just this crazy nature of true crime.
It is, and it's a question that I get on almost every video. Is it the altitude? What's wrong with your state? Great question. Great question. I can't answer that for you. I wish I knew. It's the mountains. See? Yeah, I know. There's actually studies on that. And I could go down a whole road, but I won't bore you with that. But there's a lot of studies on the altitude and depression and how high our rate is of depression comparatively to other states and all kinds of stuff. Who knows if that has anything to do with some of the things that go on here, but
And yet all the granola crunchers want to come to that region to
right.
get enlightened and be in the Rocky Mountain highs where they can get all that fresh air.
Right.
So
Right.
I like the Rocky Mountains.
Yes, I mean, it's beautiful here. I love my state, but yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just a lot of bad publicity. I don't know.
It's
Yeah.
pick a state and concentrate on any crime you want, because everybody has got wacky things going on in their states. Yeah. Just some, it's interesting. You know, I've talked about this statistic a lot. I mean, 800,000+ people go missing every year in the United States alone, not worldwide.
Wow.
And according to the Bureau of Justice, probably 87%-ish make it home. But that means 100,000+ people disappear off the face of the planet with no idea whatever happened to them. So when we look at a Gabby or a Suzanne, we're hyper focused on the one of 100,000, but in the time that Suzanne's been gone, there's now been 170,000 missing people that will never be heard from again in just the United States. I mean, that's such an incredible number when you start thinking about this. So why does Suzanne catch our attention, but the DeMolo girl in Florida is like, oh yeah, that's too bad. She probably had a rough life and wasn't living right. You know, why does Gabby capture our attention and we say, we have to do something here? There are 104,000+ people every single year that's families are going through what all of us on this call today have experienced for the last year, thinking about just Suzanne.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. I was thinking about that the other day because Echo Lloyd, I don't know if you've heard of her case.
Yes.
We had a guest on the other day. She went missing, as far as we know, the same day Suzanne did.
Same day.
But look at the press coverage and the difference. It is very interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. Well, I appreciate you being patient with me not feeling well yesterday. I felt terrible, and you're always so nice about everything. And you're always a pleasure to talk to.
Hey, I'm going to Disneyland with grandkids, by the way. I'm going to go spend the night in the Rocky Mountains at my cabin, try to get a little work done up there, and then we're heading to Disneyland with 4 screaming kids that are going to have a blast.
Well, that sounds like fun, especially
it will be fun.
It'll be interesting, especially when it's not your kids. I think as grandkids, it would be more fun.
Oh yeah, because you don't even care about lunch. All you do is say, what candy do you want to eat? What junk food? If you want to, absolutely, Papa will give it to you. Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, my back office, which happens to be all my family, they all will be very unhappy with me the next time we come on. So
I can't wait for that. Yeah, that's the beauty of being a grandparent.
Exactly.
Well, the hearing is at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. I don't think I specified that at the beginning. I always act like everyone's in Mountain Time. It's at 1:30 Mountain Time. So actually, we're looking at a little less than an hour and a half from now, when we're going to hear the decision on Morphew. So very soon, and of course, we all want justice for Suzanne. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you everyone for watching. And we will be back later tonight to talk about it on True Crime with T at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. If you haven't subbed Mike's channel, Profiling Evil, which I doubt that you haven't, we have the link on the description. So please go sub his channel.
Thank you. And make sure you're subscribing to this one. It really does help us, folks. So thank you.
And when you get back next week, I mean, I'll leave you alone. I'm going to be texting you to set up a time to come back on, hopefully one of our shows, and talk about Gabby, because I know we have a lot to talk about.
That'd be great. I did a court TV this week on Gabby, and I've done a couple of Nancy Grace podcasts this week on Gabby. Have been fortunate because of those connections to talk to Gabby's mom and her stepdad and her father. And the amount of work that they are doing is incredible, and the focus that they have. And I'll tell you, they're holding the party line. When I try to get a little bit of information about things that are part of the investigation, they just say, no, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on finding our daughter. And oh man, how proud I am of them for that.
I am too. And I think it's just heartbreaking anytime you see an interview with any of her parents or step parents. So we're definitely hoping for the best.
And, can I just say, I think social media has such a powerful influence, and this is a time for everyone to appeal to Brian to step up and do what's right and talk. But it's not a time to harass anyone, family members or anyone else, because we learn so much about these private people, including where they live and other things. And it could be really exploitive. I mean, but if we could use the power of what we have the privilege of doing, like you and I as creators, Vanessa, we could really influence, because I guarantee that Brian Laundrie is listening to this channel or any other channel that mentions the word Gabby Petito. I guarantee that Barry Morphew, when he had the ability, and every member of his family is looking at every channel that talks about Suzanne Morphew and this case. And this is a time for us as a community to really appeal to people's goodness to step up and do the right thing.
I completely agree. Completely agree. And I know, because we were talking about it earlier, there's protests going on and all kinds of stuff. And I know emotions are high right now, but this is where things get, kind of scary. So we'll have to see what happens.
Crazy. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. And like I said, we'll be back in a few hours. And thank you, Mike. Have a good time at Disneyland.
Yes.